Okay. Anyway, now, Richard Nixon won the 1972 election by a big landslide. Reason was the Democrat. Well, here's what happened. The front runner of the original front runner for the Democrats was a man named Muskie. Muskie had served in the Senate for a good many years. Nixon and his men conjured up the idea of what's called Operation Dirty Tricks, to find dirt on these candidates, to see that they did not elect a candidate who could beat Nixon, but elect someone who was easy to beat. The one they knew was easiest to beat would be George McGovern. So Nixon and his men made the false statement that Muskie's wife had been unfaithful to him. Muskie just broke down in tears. That cost Muskie the nomination. Now, folks, right now we're talking politics, again, for the 2020 election. And I want to tell you something. The front runner, the person who's a front runner in April of the year before the election, rarely winds up with a nomination. Rarely. I mean, check your history books. Who's a front runner of the Democrats today? Biden. There is a good chance that Biden will not get it. His time is not on his side. Why? What happens? If you're running a foot race, the front runner has one disadvantage. He doesn't know where the other contestants are. I had people, well, why doesn't he? Everyone who's ever won a foot race knows that if you're leading a foot race, you cannot turn around and look to see where the other contestants are. Now, they know where you are, and they can calculate how can I be, but you can't turn around to see where they are. Because when you turn around, you slow yourself down. I mean, that's one reason. There are other reasons. So the front runner also is subject to more attacks. But anyway, Muskie was destroyed. Then they said Hubert Humphrey was homosexual, which in those days meant a candidate could not be elected. It was a false statement. So they got rid of Humphrey. They wound up choosing McGovern. The Democrats wound up choosing George McGovern. And here was the mistake. George McGovern picked Senator Thomas Eagleton as his running mate. And as soon as he found it was found out, somebody said, Thomas Eagleton is a depressed man who underwent... Questions I wanted to answer was, your book devotes a whole chapter to it. And they admit that there's certain things about it that's good and certain things about it that's bad. The opening vignette is about Colin Powell, a black man, who joined the Army when he was in college through ROTC, and the Army financed his way through college. He came out of ROTC as a second lieutenant and worked his way all the way up through the ranks to become a 4-star general, and then got even higher than that when he became Secretary of Defense. And he vowed that as long as he was in power, there would be no more of these Vietnam-type wars. But then during the time he was in office, our country was invaded by terrorists. I'm talking about September 11th, when terrorists hit our tall building. Okay, no, my camcorder has failed me. Let me see now. Okay, we'll see how long that holds up. My camcorder's going to be old.
But you did the first class, right? Your morning class?
I did the morning class, yeah.
But they're a little bit different, right?
Say again?
They're a little bit different content from the afternoon class and the morning.
Yeah, if you've listened to me, all right, that should last for the rest of the class. Okay. All right, now let's see. Oh yes, as at the end of the war between Iran and Iraq, this long war that had finally ended between Iran and Iraq needed money. Iraq was headed up by Saddam Hussein. So Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. The whole world, though, came down to Saddam Hussein. The United States got a coalition together, Great Britain was involved, and they got a coalition together and they defeated Saddam Hussein and forced Saddam Hussein's armies out of Kuwait. We did not get rid of Saddam Hussein at the time, believing, folk, that the Iraqi people would rise up and destroy Saddam Hussein. It didn't happen. Years went by, and finally, Saddam Hussein was told he could not build up weapons. He did anyway. He expelled the inspectors, fearful that they might find his building up weapons. So the United States went to war with Saddam Hussein again. Now, folk, here is something, if you don't get anything else for lesson, I know I'm running into break time, so I'm going to give you a break. But here's something I want you to learn. I had a pupil some years back who was obviously from the Middle East asked me, were things better when the United States deposed Saddam Hussein in Iraq? What answer could I have given to that? There's only one answer I could have given. Some of you might know the answer. One of you does. No. When we deposed Saddam Hussein in Iraq, things in Iraq got worse. We also helped get rid of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And Libya is still fighting a civil war. Now, right now, Syria is fighting a civil war, and Syria is led by Assad. The Russians like Assad, and we don't. Personally, I really don't want to see Assad go. Why? Because I'm afraid when Assad goes, things get worse. You get rid of a bad man, and a worse situation takes its place. So what happened in Iraq when Saddam Hussein was deposed? ISIS came up. And ISIS has been accused of being responsible for the bombing that occurred Easter, so just 6 days ago in Sri Lanka. And I had, you mean ISIS still around? I say, oh yeah, we defeated ISIS in Syria, but they're popping up everywhere else in the world, including Sri Lanka, and including the United States, and including wherever else, Africa. They're popping up, just all over the place. They don't have any territory anymore. Now, I just discovered my camcorder was not plugged in. Maybe that'll help. All right, anyway. These events I'm talking about were occurring just about the time some of you people were being born. And of course, most of you are too young to remember them. I mean, the year I was born, Red China fell to the communists. I heard a lot about it later, but of course, obviously, I don't remember it. These events were going on. Now, all right, something else I want you to pick up on. In the election of 1992, George Bush ran against Bill Clinton. Bush might have won, but up come a third candidate, Ross Perot. For the first time in history, a third-party candidate temporarily was ahead of both of these two men. It was Perot and Clinton and Bush in that order. But then Perot, they had to ask him, what do you think about this and that? And every time he opened his mouth, he lost votes. He eventually only got 16% of the vote. But if it had not been for Perot, it is likely that Bush, 41, would have been elected to a second term. Here's the point I'm making, folk. I have one daughter who lives at home is probably more liberal than I am. But when it came, she was old enough to vote in the last election, and she refused to vote for any one of the top two candidates, arguing that both of them were so morally corrupt that they could not get her vote. And I can't argue with it. It was difficult to tell which one of the two top candidates in the last one was more morally corrupt than the other one. They were both pretty bad. I mean, I'm not trying to take a side. So my daughter voted for one of the other candidates. There were two others. I tried to tell her, hey, what you don't got is a vote for a third party is often a vote for the one we really don't want. But she voted for one of the other two, and of course, anyway, but the people who voted for Ross Perot, both in 1992 and in 1996, kept the Republicans from winning the White House, both years. he only took votes, I mean, no, I mean, you know, for the millions of people voting, there's some exception, but for the most part, he took votes from the Republicans. Ross Perot was a millionaire businessman. A lot of people believed that he might could have done good for the economy. All right, Clinton. But first, I gotta stop. Be back in about 10 minutes or so.